Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's just jump right into it. I want you to picture being in a pitch black room. There's a single candle lit. It's burning brightly, flickering violently, but then, boom, it just blows out. Total, complete darkness. You know, that visual perfectly captures something we are literally all addicted to, and that is the fleeting spark of inspiration. We wait around for inspiration to strike us like a lightning bolt, right? We genuinely believe that this sudden, magical burst of energy is going to magically transform our lives. We get totally caught up in the mood, the temporary surge of excitement, and we kind of trick ourselves into thinking that this spark is the absolute only thing we need to succeed. And man, that leads us right to this incredibly familiar lie. Tomorrow is the day everything changes. We've all said it. You know we have. We watch the hype videos, we scroll through those inspiring quotes, we feel that incredible, intoxicating surge of dopamine rushing through our brains, and we make a grand promise to ourselves. But then, tomorrow actually comes. And what happens? The spark is completely gone. I really want to validate this for you right now, because this is a universal, shared failure. Every single one of us falls into the trap of relying on these temporary dopamine surges. We completely buy into this false promise that motivation alone is going to somehow carry us to our ultimate goals. So here's the fatal mistake we're making. We are confusing motivation with discipline. Listen, motivation is just an emotion. It's essentially biological weather. It's that feeling of excitement that pops up when you just imagine the reward. But notice how it completely evaporates the exact second you actually have to face the cost of the work. Relying on motivation, it's like trying to power an entire city using a thunderstorm. It's totally unstable, unpredictable, and completely out of your control. Discipline, on the other hand, operates completely independently of your temporary feelings or states. Waiting around for inspiration is just a fundamentally flawed strategy for success. If you want to build real autonomy, you've got to learn to operate no matter what the biological weather is doing outside. Which brings us to a pretty uncomfortable question. Why do we always quit? Why do we say, I don't feel like it, and let a totally temporary biological state dictate our permanent future? It's a pretty provocative thought, right? And it serves as our bridge for today, because we need to pivot away from just the philosophy of lost motivation, and we really need to dive into the hard biological reality of what is literally happening inside your head. Let's move into section 2, the neuroscience of struggle. Right inside your mind, there is a quiet biological war being fought every single morning. And to win it, you've got to understand the combatants. On one side, you have your prefrontal cortex. This is the highly evolved, rational part of your brain. It's the CEO. It's responsible for your long-term planning, your logic, and holding all your highest ambitions. But on the other side, you've got your limbic system. This is your ancient emotional survival network. Its absolute primary directive is to seek immediate comfort, and it views any discomfort as a literal life or death threat. This is the ultimate internal battleground. When your alarm goes off, your highly evolved logic centers are basically in a cage match with a primitive drive that just wants to avoid the friction of getting out from under those warm blankets. So how do we actually turn the tide of that battle? Well, it all comes down to neuroplasticity. This is the brain's physical reshaping of its neural landscape through repeated action. Think about it. When you resist the urge to sleep in, or you force yourself to study when you're completely exhausted, or you choose a difficult task over an easy distraction, you are physically reshaping your brain. See, discipline isn't some static character trait you're either born with or you aren't. It is a physical muscle. Every single time you negotiate with an excuse, you strengthen the neural pathways of avoidance. You're literally training your brain to believe your own word means absolutely nothing. But every single time you execute a task despite that emotional friction, you are actually thickening the gray matter in your prefrontal cortex. How crazy is that? By choosing the hard path, you're actively rewriting your brain's baseline code. You are establishing a brand new biological law inside your head. Action precedes emotion, not the other way around. You absolutely cannot wait to feel good to act. You act, and the emotion follows. All right, section 3, systems and identity. Now that we've got a handle on the biology, we have to shift our strategy. We need to completely discard this whole idea of willpower. Willpower is a finite resource, guys. It drains throughout the day as you fight off stress, make 100 decisions, and resist temptations. If you rely entirely on pushing through by brute force, you are eventually going to break under the pressure. Instead, sustainable discipline requires a huge architectural shift from goals to systems. We all tend to obsess over our goals, right? But a goal is really just a directional pointer. It's just a focus on a final outcome. Systems, however, are the repeatable daily loops. They require a total obsession with the schedule itself. The architectural truth of your life is that you do not rise to the level of your goals. No, you will inevitably fall to the level of your daily systems. If you want to master a skill, you've got to shift your focus away from the shiny final outcome and lock in on that daily loop. But here's the kicker. A system only works if it is paired with an identity shift. Think about this for a second. If you view yourself as, say, a lazy person who is just trying really hard to be disciplined, you are literally guaranteeing your own failure. Why? Because behavior that contradicts your underlying identity never ever lasts. You will always eventually snap right back to your default state. So what is the new identity we need? You must adopt the uncompromising mindset of a true professional. Think about it. A professional doesn't need a boss looking over their shoulder to get the work done. A professional doesn't require a perfect mood or perfect weather. A professional simply honors the contract they made with themselves. To do anything else would violate their very identity. This is the fundamental identity shift you absolutely need to build sustainable discipline that actually lasts. Which brings us to our final piece of the puzzle, Section 4, the law of momentum. We've talked biology, we've talked strategy, but let's narrow our focus right down to the micro level of execution. 60 seconds. What does that number really mean? I want you to focus heavily on this one fact. The absolute hardest part of any journey, the exact point where the friction is at its absolute highest, is simply the first 60 seconds. That standing start. That is the exact moment when your brain is going to throw its heaviest resistance at you, screaming that the task is way too big, it's way too boring, or it's just plain painful. To beat that 60-second wall, you have to rely on an infallible sequence. You must apply the law of momentum to survive that initial push. Here it is. Action breeds momentum, and momentum breeds confidence. You do not need the energy to finish an entire massive project right now. You just don't. You only need the courage to survive the first 60 seconds of friction. Because I promise you, once the wheels actually begin to turn, the friction drops, your focus sharpens up, and your mind adapts to the environment. And really, what is the point of all this struggle? Well, it leads to this. The ultimate reward of this entire framework of self-discipline isn't just wealth or status or getting praise from others. Discipline does not equal punishment. It equals absolute freedom. Freedom from your own fluctuating moods. Freedom from the tyranny of your random impulses. And most importantly, freedom from the crushing regret of knowing you settled for less than you were capable of becoming. So, I'm going to leave you with this uncompromising call to action. Stop debating. Stop negotiating with that limbic system. Stop waiting for a spark of motivation that is frankly never coming. You have to immediately discard your reliance on how you're feeling in the moment. This is the equation of discipline. You understand the biology now. You have the systems, and you know the 60-second rule. I really want to end this explainer by forcing you to confront your own potential today. The contract is signed, the clock is ticking. Will you finally get to work?